As you might have realised by now, I'm a big fan of HMO property investments, but in this video I'm going to look specifically at student HMO investing. I'm going to look at why you should consider investing in student HMOs, and I'm going to give you some top tips for making a success of investing in student HMOs. Hi, my name is Mark Lloyd. I'm co-founder of Property Master Academy, and I've been investing in properties since 2005. So first of all, why should you choose to set up a student HMO instead of another type of HMO? There are quite a few good reasons. Number one, rents for student HMOs are usually higher than other types, and so student HMO yields can be some of the very best. Far from being poor, many students today are often pretty well resourced too. As well as a student loan, many will have help from their parents and perhaps also a job. They're willing to pay for decent accommodation. Number two, in the right areas, demand for student accommodation is huge. During the academic year, at least, you can expect full occupancy. And that's something that's very difficult to obtain with other HMOs. Number three, students often rent a house as a group of friends rather than individually. So it's easier to let and run a house occupied by a group rather than dealing with lots of individual lets. Number four, once they're in. Students will generally rent a room in your HMO and agree to pay for it for the full academic year. That makes it easier than renting rooms for just a few weeks or months at a time and always having to deal with tenants moving in and moving out. Number five, with student HMOs, you can also usually ask for a guarantor for the rent and for any damage that might be caused, and this will usually be their parents. It's a small detail maybe, but it reduces the risk of being left out of pocket if a tenant can't or won't pay. There are a couple of downsides to student HMO investing which you need to bear in mind, however. Firstly, student HMOs have a reputation as being hard to manage. For example, issues with all-night parties, noise, rubbish being left behind at the end of the term can cause a lot of problems with local residents and local councils. It doesn't happen with all student HMOs, but it is something to be aware of. Secondly, as I mentioned, student housing is a seasonal business. Students start looking for accommodation really early. Often it can be the previous year before the term actually starts. And in our instances, when we run our HMOs, student HMOs, we actually get them to sign a 12-month contract. Now, there are some landlords that don't do that. They only do a 9-month contract, which means you can potentially have 3 months of your HMO when you're going to be empty. But that's also a good time to actually maybe refurbish or change some of the furnishings if they need changing. But in the way we run it, we actually do ours for 12 months. Some of the students will go home during that time, but it still gives us time to actually change around the rooms if we need to. However, even if your HMO is empty for 3 months, the rent you can earn from just 9 months, usually more than makes up for this. But you really do need to be geared up for this seasonal way of working when you let a student house. So where are the best areas to set up a student HMO? Well, it goes without saying that to set up a student HMO, you need to be somewhere with at least one university. But there is a bit more to it than that. It's usually the case of the nearer your house is to a university campus, the better. Why? Because students love the idea they can roll out of bed at 9 and be in a lecture by 9:30. So areas within 15 to 20 minutes walk or maybe a short bus ride from the university campus tend to be most popular. Also, in most university towns and cities, there are certain areas where students prefer to live. Although these places often already have lots of student HMOs, they're usually the best places to set up a new one as there is ready-made demand. I also need to mention that it's very important to check supply and demand before setting up a new student HMO. Now, while some areas have a shortage of student HMOs, there are some areas where, because student HMOs are so popular with investors, there are now too many of them. So you absolutely must check the situation. Now, university accommodation offices might be able to tell you if there is a need for more HMO accommodation locally. Also, ask letting agents who deal with student accommodation. And you can ask them this: if I set up a student HMO, what's the best place to do it, and will you be able to let it easily? When checking out supply and demand, you must check out what competition there is from university halls and what is known as PBSA2, and that stands for purpose-built student accommodation. Some universities have invested heavily in halls of residence in recent years, and they tend to pressurise students into renting that. Also, some cities have seen a lot of PBSA or purpose-built student accommodation blocks built in recent years. Now, these are run by specialist PBSA companies and backed by large corporate investors. So here's a little secret I should let you into, however. University halls and PBSA blocks tend to be more expensive than student HMO rooms. Also, a lot of students actually prefer to share a house with their friends, where they can do as they like, within reason, let's hope, rather than having to abide by all the rules and regulations in halls. So there is still a role for student HMOs, but you must be aware that university halls and PBSA blocks represent competition for private HMO landlords. So next, what rules and regulations apply to student HMOs? Well, the rules and regulations for student HMOs are exactly the same as other HMOs. You will always need an HMO license for a large HMO with 5 people or more. Smaller HMOs may also need what is known as an additional HMO license depending on the area. You will need planning permission for a new HMO if it's in what is known as an Article 4 area. But this is the important thing. Because student HMOs are so popular in some parts of student towns and cities, it is more likely those areas will have additional licensing or be subject to Article 4. So that's something else you will need to check. Before we finish, I think it's important to say something about kitting out your student HMO. Many people have the idea that because students probably won't look after your property, you shouldn't bother about what it looks like, and you should furnish it with the cheapest, oldest furniture you can find. This can be a massive mistake. Today, students expect a good standard of accommodation. If you decorate and furnish it like their granny's house, it's likely to be very hard to let. So to make your HMO attractive to students and easy to let, you need to fit it out with modern kitchens and bathrooms and contemporary furniture and decor. The fastest broadband that is available included in the rent is also an absolute must. And one last thing I should say about student HMOs, student houses sometimes have a bit of a reputation. They scare off some investors. If you're worried about that, then rather than manage your property yourself, the solution is to use a specialist student HMO letting agent to do absolutely everything for you. All big student towns and cities have these. And while of course they charge for this, is one way to enjoy all the benefits of student HMO investing with fewer of the disadvantages. Well, if you have enjoyed this video, please hit that like button so that others just like you will get to see it, and also subscribe to our channel so you get notified of other videos that we post each week. Appearing on your screen right now will be more videos that will help you in your property business. Thanks for listening.